Well, I traveled far and wide, and in as far as Edinburgh too. As part of Global Music Match, I am delighted to share with you my interview with Iona Fyfe. She's from Aberdeen, northeast of Scotland, but she's based in Glasgow. She has a number of accolades and touring experience from around the globe. I hope after this interview you go and start listening to her music and watching her music videos. When you do, let her know that you love her. I think she's phenomenal. Here's my interview with Iona Fyfe. Hello, Iona Fyfe. How are you today?
Hello, I'm good. Yourself?
Great, thank you. Okay, in reading about you, I just discovered that you were at Folk Alliance 2020 in New Orleans. Is that correct?
I was, yes. I was on crutches, so a lot of people who I met would refer to me as that Scottish ballad singer on the crutches.
Scott,
Um,
I didn't see, I was there too. I'm not someone who really studied voice, and you're so young, and you have this just this beautiful. I mean, you have a voice like a bird. It's very established. It's pure and strong and very like you like every note steady, there's a confidence in the delivery. So I want to know, and my audience would, I'm sure, love to know, how did you learn how to sing? What was that your journey like with your voice?
it's a really, really odd journey because I straddled a few different things. So, like the first time I performed live
Hmm.
was 2003, and I was 5, but I wasn't singing. I was doing Doric poetry. So Doric is the dialect or the vernacular of the northeast of Scotland. It's a type of Scots. But I was learning. It's like a competition thing, and
Wow.
there's singing competitions, there's piano, fiddle, poetry competitions. So I entered in the poetry with one of these poems, and then I met other singers, tradition bearers, musicians who said, "Oh, well, you can sing too. It's just like learning a poem, but you're using your voice like melody." So I was like, "Okay." So I went away, and then I learned a few Scots songs and went back. But at school, I mean, I joined all my school choirs, but I was
Okay.
really like always in the background. Like I wasn't a strong singer. I had a really high, flaky head voice. And then in school, I would always like do the school choir and be involved in the trad music thing. And then
Mhm.
I'd go to lots of folk clubs and still learn all this repertoire throughout my entire life. But then in school, I would do, amateur dramatics, so musical theatre stuff. I did a lot of classical singing. I got a scholarship to go into Aberdeen to study at the Northeast of Scotland Music School. So
Wow.
I got a few lessons from there.
Uh-huh.
Did a lot of musical theatre, which is fun. And I'm doing I've by this time when this interview is out, I will have done a live stream of musical theatre songs over lockdown.
Oh,
But
wow.
my heart was in traditional music. My
Yeah.
heart was always there. But the interesting thing is that when I went to conservatoire, it was to study Scots song at the Royal Conservatoire of Scotland. So you can just similar to in Nova Scotia,
Yeah.
there's a school for doing traditional music there. I could study Scottish songs, balladry in
Hmm.
at a conservatoire in Glasgow. And a lot of the singing teaching I had there was repertoire based.
Hmm.
So it was to do with tradition and context and the songs and the dialect. And that was
Wow.
all great. It was perfect. And I had some of the greatest Scots song singing teachers like Rod Patterson and Fiona Hunter. But when it came to the nitty gritty, I started touring lots. I started using my voice so much.
Yeah.
And I had to get my tonsils out when I was 20 because I had tonsillitis 9 times out
Oh,
of 12 months. And I toured through it all the time. Then I got my tonsils out. Then I
wow.
had to go to speech and language therapy. And at
Wow.
that time, I said to the conservatoire, "Look, I love my Scots song singing teachers. I'm learning so much about history and context and
Yeah.
repertoire from them, but I need something more for my technique. I'm struggling. I just got my
Mm.
tonsils out. I need help." I
Yeah.
really need help.
Yeah.
So what they did is they put me to a musical theatre vocal coach.
Mm-hmm.
And I never studied musical theatre songs with her. What I did was I took folk songs to
Mm-hmm.
her, and she would help me relearn these folk songs, use technique and background of musical theatre vocal coaching. And to be honest, some people would go, that's madness, but it's not, because folk singing and musical theatre songs are all about the narrative.
Mm-hmm.
And I've kind of used that technique ever since. Really interesting, but
Wow.
getting through vocal trauma,
Yeah.
terrifying.
Yeah. Well, all of that is fascinating. Sounds like really hard work. Like nothing I would have ever signed up for, but clearly when I hear you singing, I mean it's it's paid off. And the fact that you have overcome so much with your voice already and the trauma and the and pain, like those are some of the hardest things. One of my biggest nightmares on tour is to not just get a cold, but then something in upper respiratory that causes burning, and trying to sing through that is really a struggle. But I bet that you are so much more knowledgeable and skilled at working through that now that you've gone through all of that. It's really quite impressive and remarkable. Speaking of impressive and remarkable, I've watched your videos. You have achieved so much by way of your accolades, developing your instrument, touring around the world already. Performing at recognized showcase events. The list is very, very long. How how are you managing it all? And you asked me about mental health. You strike me as someone who's extremely busy. You're very engaged and involved in the music community, in your cultural community as well. Mental health. I mean, what are you doing? What are some of the things you've learned in the short? I hate to keep saying how young you are, but I just think for me, I think it's looking back, I always wish that I had started younger, and I'm very, very impressed and by your commitment at such a young age, because a lot of people your age are not into seriously committing to anything.
Um,
Like,
I think I'll answer both of those. But
yeah,
what's quite interesting in Scotland in traditional music is that the educational programs, or the competition I was talking about before,
yeah.
there is great youth music initiatives to get young people interested in the tradition. So it's
Oh, that's
very
great.
natural to meet brilliant musicians who are exceptionally young. I mean, all of the peers I went to conservatoire with, they're so good. They're so,
Yeah.
so good. I think that's because we have very good cultural organisations who encourage them, and we're
Hmm.
very grateful for that in Scotland. So there's just so many good musicians out there, and I think I just knew that I wanted to be a performer. I
Hmm.
wasn't quite sure how that would take place, because of course I loved musical theatre, I loved
Hmm.
acting when I was in school, I loved debating and public speaking and
Hmm.
presenting stuff, and for a very small period of time I really wanted a career in politics.
Oh, well,
But
yeah,
then
you've been.
folk singing was the thing that I went for, because it was the most natural to me and my identity.
Hmm.
In terms of mental health, I'm still
Hmm.
on like a learning curve of
Hmm.
trying to deal with it. I mean, right now we're kind of like, I'm very stressed about a lot of things, but I'm
Hmm.
trying to manage it by managing my time better. And I think being
Yeah.
honest about mental health is so important, because for a long period of time, if I didn't reply to an email for months and months, I would always make up, an excuse being like, I'm so sorry I had an illness or something. Instead, I should have been like, I'm sorry, I was overwhelmed, I was
Yeah.
really stressed, but I'm
Yeah.
here now.
Hmm.
But instead of being honest about like how my mental health was, I would always say, oh, I had another bout of tonsillitis, which I probably did. But
Yeah.
instead of just being honest, being like, I'm really struggling with workload, I'm struggling with X, Y, and
Yeah.
Z,
Yeah.
instead I hid that. And I was like, actually, I shouldn't have, because we should just be a little bit more open with where we're at. And certainly when I was a student, I was a full-time musician touring, but I was
Mm.
also a student. This is my first year not being a student.
Mm.
So I was constantly, I didn't have time. I didn't have time for
Yeah.
anything, because I was finishing this degree at conservatoire, and then I wanted to, do albums and tour, and I just wanted it
Yeah.
all.
Yes.
I wasn't willing to compromise, because
Yeah.
I didn't want to. But my mental health took a total hit. the reason that I had tonsillitis all the time was because I was just burnt out all the
Yeah.
time. I was
Yeah.
just exhausted. And you know, I've went to places, you know, and done CBT and counselling, and I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I suffer from a thing called fibromyalgia, which
Mm-hmm.
basically means that I'm in pain most of the time.
Mm.
One day I'll wake up and I'll be in agony, and then the next day I'll wake up and I will be fine. It's a very underfunded, under-researched illness. It's
Mm-hmm.
suffered by more females than males.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's called fibromyalgia. You can look it up.
Yeah.
But that is to do with mental health as well. But
Yeah.
it's also to do with physical trauma. So I think
Mm-hmm.
that it came from getting the tonsils out and then being in shock. But
Sure.
I for the fibromyalgia, the treatment of that is actually to take antidepressants. So it
Mm-hmm.
helps you physically, but also supposed to help your emotion, you know,
Mm-hmm.
your emotional capacity. And I've taken them and then I've not taken them, and I actually don't really see a positive difference with taking these medications. So really,
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to focus on my own mental health by doing things that make me happy. And I
Yeah.
think that's the bottom line, put your happiness first. But
Yes.
a lot of the time I struggle to take that advice, and instead of my happiness and my comfort, I'm thinking of all the organizations and responsibilities and
Yeah.
things that I'm supposed to do for other people.
Yeah.
So it's a learning curve. I'm still learning. I'm 22. I'm going to figure this out, but just not yet. I'm really thinking about, you know, what things am I really passionate about that I really should focus on, because I'm finding, you know, I'm a director of the Traditional Music and Song Association of Scotland. That's
Mm-hmm.
great. I love being involved in that. On the board of the Traditional Music Forum, Musicians Union
Yeah.
Committee, and this new thing, Ur Vice. And it's really difficult because I would like to just be able to write some new music, make a new album, but I'm finding that I'm doing
Yeah.
lots of work for everything else,
Everything
and it's
else. Yeah.
unpaid.
Yeah.
So this year,
Yeah.
it's about passion really, and one of the things I'm probably more passionate about right now is the language organization, because we're pushing for something. But I
Mm-hmm.
think I'm going to think about laying off a few things in order to work on
Mm-hmm.
me.
Well, okay, I want to talk more about Vice. But right before we do, I was watching a lot of your videos. And one of the things I noticed that shines with you is that you're very much connected to Scottish heritage. The stories, the history, the stories of the land, it comes out in the songs that you choose to sing. And if I'm not mistaken, I think I don't want you to do this. I want you to stay on your path. But I think that if I were to go to Scotland again, I would want you to be my tour guide. I think you would be fantastic because you have this background with the heritage and the history. And I was watching your video. It was I'm probably butchering the pronunciation here. Elphinstone Institute, University of Aberdeen video. You know, where you were like walking in the field and by these old buildings, and you were like telling everybody about the history. I don't know how that came about.
Um, that was really interesting. It was my friend Alistair Heather, who is
Uh-huh.
quite well known in Scotland for his activism within the Scots language. He was like, "Oh, do you want to do this?" And we really didn't have that much time to throw it together, so it's a bit jaggedy. But yeah, I think I'm really passionate about the northeast of Scotland because that's where I'm from. I mean, I live in
Yep.
Glasgow, but I think Glasgow. I'm here because this is where. I mean, this is cheesy, but Glasgow is for traditional music
Yep.
what like Nashville is to country.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's just so many great musicians based out of Glasgow, and because there's a degree course and it's kind of close to everything really. You can get to Sheffield in a few hours. You can get up north in the Highlands. You know, it's a good
It's
place, but
central.
it's
Good.
not my home. You know, my
Mm-hmm.
home is Aberdeenshire. That's where my parents are, and I think that's yeah. A lot of the songs are from Aberdeenshire. But saying that, I'm really interested more so in kind of the Americana, old-timey, bluegrassy country thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
Turns out a lot of the ballads from Aberdeenshire went over to the Appalachian Ozark Mountains
Mm-hmm.
or all down mountain ranges, and then became part of the American folk song canon. And that's what I really want to tap into in order to
Mm-hmm.
make my music a little bit more accessible. So
Uh-huh.
so this one is called Dark Turn of Mind,
Nice.
and got some Appalachian ballads in there, but they're originally from Scotland and England. So we have this universalism of balladry. It's very, very old songs, but it
Mm-hmm.
seems that American singers and folk singers like Sheila K. Adams and Sarah Gray and people who are rooted, mountain dulcimer playing, really
Yeah.
cool singers have taken these songs and ballads that's been passed down through their family for generations, and they've kind of made them really cool. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of looking to that for my inspiration,
Mm-hmm.
because there's huge the National Library of Congress in America asked me to do like a live stream of ballads that was collected by an American folklorist who came
Mm-hmm.
to the northeast of Scotland. So there's so many links, and I think that my next step, make my stuff accessible, is to maybe explore those links. And that's not to mean I'm turning my back on my heritage, because it technically is
No,
my
it's part of
heritage.
your heritage. Yeah. I was going to ask you how you select your songs. I mean, there's going to be so many to choose from.
Well, we're opening a can of worms here. So if you're really a folk singer, what you do is that you have a few different points of reference.
Hmm.
So my first point of reference would be to find a big old ballad book
Yeah.
similar to this. This is called the Greg Duncan Folk Song Collection, and
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Gavin Gregg and James Duncan were two folks in the northeast of Scotland who went around and collected over 3,000 folk songs in the northeast alone
Mm.
and published this. And then, well, they didn't publish it. Aberdeen University published it several years after their death. So there are hundreds of these kind of big ballad books floating around. The first time I went to Canada, the lovely guy who had me over, he took me to the University of Guelph, and
Oh
they have a
yeah.
Scottish studies department, and I kind of snuck into their library, and there was so many Scottish ballad books that I knew, and I was like, how is this over here? But
Cool.
yeah, there are so many of these. So my first point of
Right.
reference would be ballad collections
Okay.
books, whether that be American ones or, it doesn't
Hmm.
really matter. They all have the same songs in them. So there'll be a
Okay.
strain from England, a version from Aberdeenshire, a version from America.
Hmm.
So books. And then I will look at archive recordings,
Hmm.
whether that be, I would go into like the University of Aberdeen and like look at their old whatever. But
Yeah.
now there's archive recordings online. There's
Hmm.
really good, the National Library of Congress has hundreds, the English folk song and dance has hundreds. I think called Tobrin Dulcus, Kist of Riches in Scotland, has hundreds. And these are kind of like oral history,
Hmm.
folk song recordings, anecdotes. And so you'd get the melody from that, because a lot of the times these do have some of the melodies written out, but usually it's text.
Okay.
So I'd get the text, then I'd pick my melody, and then I would go on to listen to contemporary recordings if there are contemporary recordings available.
Hmm.
So ultimately, if I'm picking a song, I will go, right, I'm going to pick this song and interpret this song. And then I'll find my finalized text. So I could take fragments from one book, another fragment of the same text from another
Cool.
book, and kind of make a text that's unique to my version.
Cool.
So it's different from all the other folk singers' versions.
Yeah.
And then I'll melody, or I'll write a melody to it. Like I'll write a new melody. So it's a really, really long process to make new interpretations of ballads and folk songs if you want them to be unique to you. So it takes a long time,
Yeah.
but that's about my writing process, really.
I do want to talk about or vice, the Scots language and your involvement with that. And then I've printed off some text to try and read a little bit, and then maybe you could correct me.
So urvice means
Urvice.
our voice.
Our
It
voice.
means
Yeah.
our voice.
Hmm.
So in Scotland, just to backtrack, we have three national languages. We have English, which
Hmm.
is what I've been talking to you this whole time, because being able to speak Scots means that you can turn it on and turn it off, because it is
Okay.
another language.
Hmm.
So that's why I don't talk it all the time, because sometimes it would just be inappropriate.
Hmm.
So we have English, which
Hmm.
is what we've been talking about. We
Yep.
have Scots, and we have Gaelic. Now, Gaelic is what you might have been exposed to in Cape Breton or in Nova Scotia. There's a lot of Gaelic
Yeah.
speakers there.
Hmm.
But Scots is the kind of Germanic language that does derive from Old English, but also a kind of Germanic thing. And you hear that in like Shetland, Orkney, Aberdeenshire, Angus, Ayrshire, the Borders, and it's what people associate with Robert Burns and Auld Lang Syne, but they forget that there's so much more to the Scots language than just Robert Burns. So English and Gaelic are official languages, and they're protected as official languages, which is why you have Gaelic medium education, there's Gaelic signage all over the place. It's really great. I'm really happy. But Scots doesn't have that official status yet. So the European Charter for Minority Languages protects it. However, we don't have a Scots Language Act to put it into legal writing that this is a language protected by this act. Likewise, we don't get funding for many Scots projects. We don't have, it's not got the status that it needs. Kids in school all get told off from teachers for speaking the way that they speak. It's really sad. We've got a long way to go. So Urvice is a collective of folk. So basically we have creatives, academics, lawyers, political people, all involved in this organisation to try and get official legal status for the Scots Lead, our language. It's very tricky because each place in Scotland has their ain way of speaking Scots. So in the northeast, folk would be speaking in the Doric tongue. So it would be, instead of saying where, what, they would say far and fit. However, in the south of Scotland, people would say whar or whit with a whit. So as you can tell, it's very complex because folk in the northeast have that. They've got a completely different register as folk from in the south or in Angus or in Fife. Likewise, people in Shetland, instead of saying the and there, they say there and the. So like my brain's exploded with that. So the issue is that we kind of need a lot of help to get a standard form of Scots. That's very controversial because, as you can imagine, each region wants to put forward their own tongue, their mother tongue, the tongue that they speak in, and there's a lot of compromise needed. But I think did you know that Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone has been translated into Scots?
Oh,
and it's
wow.
called Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. It's more global than ever. Like we had to think of Scots language last year. I mean, all of my albums, or most of them, well, the album is in Scots, and I've been able to tour the world speaking and singing Scots to folk that'll listen. And having Harry Potter in Scots, that's brilliant because that means that people will go, oh, that's cool. But a lot of the issue is that when young kids turn on the TV, it's very rare that they see someone speaking in Scots to legitimise the fact that they'll usually be listening to kind of folk that are speaking in English, folk with American accents, folk with British accents. It's very unlikely that a child will be able to turn the TV on and see folk that they identify with. So if we had more Scots speakers on the TV or more Scots speakers on the radio doing broadcast, or even like in high profile, high budget films, then our own kids would be able to identify with that and go, hey, that's the way that I speak, that's fine. It would legitimise, it would give them a sort of national identity instead of making them ashamed for the way that they speak, because in the northeast of Scotland it's primarily a fishing and a farming community, so fishing and farming, and it's kind of usually a working class type labouring thing. And unfortunately it seems that the dialect and the language has still been associated with the fact that it's kind of a working class thing. So we are often called chuchters, backwards people. There's a lot of stigmatisation on folk that speak in Scots and Doric because they think that we're uneducated or that we're a different working class. But that's not the case, because nowadays, with social mobility, you've got folk that are doing really well for themselves, but they choose to speak in this dialect and this language because that's why they're free. However, I certainly struggle with it because I think, well, if someone hears me speaking like that, then will they not think that I'm stupid or backwards. You know, if I have to go to a meeting in London for a scheme that
Hmm.
I'm on, it's sad, but I really sometimes worry because I sit on committees with um, people who are high hegians, well, high head ones of orchestras, or they're important people, or they're
Hmm.
usually white middle class. So I worry that if I rock up to meetings and speak the way that I speak to my mum and dad,
Hmm.
they'll think that I'm working class. They'll think that I'm uneducated. That's so wrong, so,
Yeah.
so wrong.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it takes people to go, actually, no, I'm going to speak like this anyway, and I am educated, thank you very much. So we have a lot of issues, but the more folk that can go, nah, I'm going to speak and sing and present in Scots, the better.
Yeah, I think it's so fascinating. And just reading, you had made a post, reading the Scots language in a post for Urvoice. Um, I was trying to say it, and then there was a lot of similarities, and I thought, I think I can, understand it. But I'm gonna post the Urvice social tags so that my audience can check it out. And if you're interested, curious, if you like languages, check it out. It's really fascinating, and especially if you already or speak English or have if you can speak German, you'll find a lot of similarities, a lot.
It's
And
very similar.
yeah,
Because
and
in the Doric, I'm just going to come in here. In Doric, the word for eight is acht.
at.
In German, the word for eight is also acht.
Hmm.
We have things like Licht and Nicht, and
Yes,
it's very, very similar.
I
Very,
know.
very similar.
So
Let you get on.
I'm gonna give it a shot here. One sentence at a time, not too many, just to give people an idea. And then I'll say the sentence, tell you what I think it means, and then maybe you could correct me if I've really butchered it. But I just want to make an attempt because I do find it fascinating. And I wish I had known more about this before I ever set foot in Scotland for the first time, the only time I'd toured there. So okay, so I'm just reading off of the Urvice website. I printed off a page here, and the title here I'm reading is of this paragraph: Fit, why should we be caring about Scots? Why should we be caring about Scots? Did I butcher that?
Yeah, perfect.
Really?
Fit, why should we be thinking about Scots?
Did I
Like, fit, why?
did I fit why? Fit why?
Yeah, yeah, fit,
Okay.
why. It means like why
Yeah, why?
like
Yeah.
what why should you be here.
Yeah.
The thing is it's grammatically different from English, so if you
Mm-hmm.
translated that, it would mean why do we care about
Yeah.
Scots, but in Scots it just means fit why,
That's so
but
like
it's
German.
different.
Like für was, oftentimes in German you have like, two words. In English we would just say one word, but it's very similar in that way. Okay, so I'll tell you why. Scots is leid, dit is integrated into Scots culture, is part of your identity, and is fit makes ourselves different by the rest of the world. So, uh-oh, Scots is alive.
I
Okay,
can't remember the
it's a language
so
that
do
is
shorter.
okay. Yeah, Scots. It's a language that's integrated into Scots culture. I'm assuming Scots is a lied fit
Lead lead it means
lead.
lead means language.
Language. Okay, I was hoping that that's what that meant. Scots is a lead fit is integrated.
Integrated, just like we
Integrated.
don't have a word for integrated.
Okay, into Scots culture. That's integrated. It's a language that's integrated into the Scots culture. Yeah, it's part of your identity. It's part of our identity, and is fit makes ourselves different for the rest of the world. Is what makes ourselves different than the rest of the world. Is that right?
Yeah, that's perfect.
But
Perfect. That's
not
it.
the pronunciation can't be perfect. Did I
No, the
butcher?
pronunciation isn't, but your interpretation of it is.
Would you?
Fit matters
Would
different for the rest of the world. Yeah.
is there anybody that like would there be a situation where somebody could speak the Scots language but not understand plain English? Would that? Like, are there some people that would have a hard time understanding what I'm saying?
It depends on the context.
Okay.
So, for example, there are people who grew up with Gaelic as their first language and then they had to learn English. But
Uh-huh.
likewise, the thing is in the Northeast, the way that folks speak is like they just speak in really broad Doric. So it
Hmm.
depends, you know, a lot of the farmers that I went to school with, they lived a little bit further out of the town.
Hmm.
So they spoke kind of differently as to how we would.
Okay.
It's all to do with context, who they're speaking to, who, what they do in life. They would certainly, I think it's more like they would get a grasp of English, but they would only communicate in Doric or in Scots. They
Hmm.
wouldn't really communicate in English.
Okay.
Um, and if they did communicate with English, then they would speak in a different register. They would try and
Hmm.
poshen themselves up, if you get what I
Okay.
mean. They would try to make
Yeah.
themselves heard or make themselves a wee bit. It really depends. I'm talking in like this a farmer kind of context because I know
Hmm.
that that's how a lot of the farmers have much stronger dialects than
Hmm.
what, for example, I would, because I went to, you know, conservatory education, I went to debating and public speaking, so I kind of had to be able to switch it on and off.
Yeah.
But these folk that they've kind of maybe never left the farm, that's their life, because of geographical, you know, not isolation, but because of the
Sure.
way that they've maybe never left.
Yeah.
They would probably only speak in that register, which is it's really nice to go back to the Northeast and be able to speak this way to everyone. Because in
Yeah.
Glasgow, there's not many folk that speak this way.
Yeah.
Whereas I've got like a few pals that if I met up for a coffee in Glasgow, we would only speak in Doric, and that's the way that we'll stick to
Ah,
each other.
fun.
But if my mum, you know, if I was having a rehearsal, being like, "Oh, can you take it from that bar? Let's until the end of the song," and my like mum or dad called me, then I would be using Doric and Scots to speak to them.
Interesting.
It's just on context, and
That's
that
super
that
cool. Yeah.
proved that it is a separate language, and that
Yeah.
folk that are speaking in Scots they are bilingual. But
Mhm.
nowadays I mean, I speak in a hybrid most of the time in order to make myself understood, but also to still speak a wee bit of Scots.
Yeah.
And that's probably why I'll most likely be speaking in English and then I'll throw in a random word
Yeah.
and everyone will be like, what does that word mean? I think it's more like
Mhm.
I'm trying to make it more accessible, but also be understood. But
Yeah.
in my music, there's a song on my first album called Guys of Took, and
Mhm.
that's in full Doric. So I don't know if you want to share that, but
Yes, I want to
if
share it. Yeah.
I mean,
I,
it's got mandolin in it. It's got, you know, it's got all the cool instruments in it,
yeah.
but it's in full Doric.
Yeah.
And it's I think because it's music and because the way that you can see my expression, you can almost get the gist of the song
Hmm.
if I introduced it. But it's in full Doric. Whereas
Yeah.
there's definitely new songs in the Dark Turn of Mind album EP that's in full English because I
Hmm.
cover a Gillian Welch song, I do a Gregory Alan Isakov
Oh, cool.
song. I just want to make people know that I'm not just a one trick pony and I'm happy to sing in both English and Scots.
Yeah.
Because that's the thing is that, you know, it is sad and I can make Scots as global as I can, but at the end of the day, I'll have a bigger platform if I can sing in both English and Scots.
You offer a traditional ballad workshop on your Patreon, and I'm a huge fan of Patreon. I have my own Patreon as well, and I'm excited to share with my patrons. I'm going to let them know that you're on Patreon and to check it out. You are at 43 patrons right now, and your next goal is to hit 50. I mean, you're just around, you're right turning the corner to 50. And I mean, it's just going to grow from here. But I was going to ask you what a snapshot of what a traditional ballad workshop looks like for patrons.
So, for example, traditional ballad workshop, I do it in both Scots and English, so
Hmm.
people from throughout the world can take part. So, what I do is
Hmm.
I pick a ballad,
Hmm.
I translate it from Scots to English, I
Okay.
post the lyrics up, I also post a Scots language guide up so that they can
Oh, wow.
understand. I
Yep.
also post historical information about the ballad and signpost to versions that my friends have recorded or my favourite
Cool.
versions. And then what I do is I make like a video tutorial of me singing it in both English and Scots, and then I go through it like verse by verse in both English and Scots. It takes ages.
Yeah, it's 30
I really
minutes.
need to do another one, but it's really worthwhile. But
Yeah.
also on Patreon, I've been doing like polls saying, okay, what song do you want to hear me sing?
Hmm.
And I need to record like a Joan Baez song this week.
Wow.
So that's going
Oh,
to force me to sing in English
yes,
and to
yes,
make new content that's a wee bit more accessible than the bothy ballads from the northeast of Scotland. So I
yeah,
think that's pushing me, definitely pushing me. So it's
yes.
fun.
I'm very excited. You have a bright now and bright future. So I'm going to point people to Urvice. I'm going to point them to your Patreon and Bandcamp where they can buy your music. And are there any other sites, or your official website? Are there anything else particular that you want me to point my audience to?
There's a lot of music up on Bandcamp that wasn't, or that's not on iTunes or Spotify or anything. Like I've released some stuff over lockdown only on Bandcamp, which
Mhm.
it really depends
Okay.
what people like. But yeah, I think Bandcamp is so good. I don't know. Like Facebook, Instagram, you've got it
All
all.
the socials, yeah. Oh, I'll be sharing it all throughout your week. I'm so excited, and it's been a privilege and a pleasure to talk with you, get to know you, and I mean, I feel like we'll stay connected now and forever. Thanks to Global Music Match. Thank you so much, Iona Fyfe.
Thank you so much. Cheers.
Cheers.
I travel